Howdy, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cowboys in the Osage. It's old Cody Boy back with you, and I got my co-host, as always, rodeo historian Jimbo Snively. What's going on, Jimbo?
Oh, Cody, it's just another great day in the Osage. And believe it or not, we got another great roper from right here in the Osage. He was a 15 times national finalist in the steer roping. He was a 4-time Prairie Circuit champion. He's won the Seniors Championship. He's won just about every roping in the country, including Cheyenne, Ben Johnson, Wendy Ryan twice, Claremore, McAllister, Douglas, Wyoming. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Of course, I'm talking about Rockin Rod Hartness from Pawhuska, Oklahoma. Thanks for sitting in with us today, Rod.
I sure appreciate y'all letting me come down here.
Well, we're glad to have you.
Rockin Rod. Right off the bat, how'd you get the name Rockin Rod? So we can get that out of the way.
Well, I don't know. We're on live right here, so maybe I better think about this a little bit. But no, really, the truth of it is I was roping in the Wendy Ryan my first year, and Kurt Robinson was announcing. And I don't know, just, you know how Kurt had stats on everything, and it was probably 1985, I think, when I roped there my first time. And he was like, this boy can come from the Osage, Pawhuska, Oklahoma, you know, Ben Johnson, Rockin Rod. And it just stuck to me. Everybody, your dad, everybody, that was just it. It was Rockin Rod. So
had a good ring to it, still does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fits him good, too.
Yeah, it stood the test of time, hadn't it?
Stood the test of time. Rod, where were you raised up at?
Here in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, at our home place where we live at now. That's where I was raised.
When did you start deciding you wanted to be a rodeo cowboy or just a cowboy, Rod?
Well, I was raised, well, not raised, but I roped a lot at my Uncle Orban Garrett's. And so usually all summer long, I was on the pipeline with my dad. So really, as a young age, I always wanted to be a pipeliner and to rodeo, because that was what you did here. And Orban was really known as being a great horse trainer in the calf roping side. He trained world champion calf horses, and he furnished horses for Clifton Smith and Jess Goodspeed and guys like that. And so, you know, he was very knowledgeable and on training, but he was real particular. I mean, when you rode his horses, you rode them right. If you didn't, then you got off and you worked the chutes. So that's kind of where I started roping out there at Orban's out west of town.
That's the guy who started to teach you how to rope the first time?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Orban Garrett, the great Orban Garrett. I saw. Yes, did you see that? Did you see that flyer the other day from that calf roping?
Yes, I did.
Match.
I did.
Did you know anything about that, Jimbo?
No, I didn't. I knew he'd roped quite a few match ropings. I didn't know about that particular one. And I wonder what year that was, Rod.
I don't know. It didn't have it on it, but that was Orban's main. Like his hero was Jess Goodspeed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Jess stayed. I think Jess was run up to the world one year and made the national finals quite a few years. Mm-hmm. And so when we would practice, everything would be, you got to be smooth like Jess. Mm-hmm. You got to be smooth like Jess. I mean, that was Orban's main guy.
Right.
And Orban was the type that, you know, roped all over, but he always came home. He didn't care about traveling.
Right.
It was maybe go to Fort Worth. He won Fort Worth one year, won Houston, placed big at Denver, and then he just comes home.
Yeah. There are a lot of people like that.
Yeah. I mean, that was his deal.
Yeah.
And
I don't blame him. I like to wake up in my own bed.
Yes, sir.
There were a lot of great ropers from up here in the Osage that they just pop in and out and win a whole bunch of big rodeos or a bunch of big money, and then you'd never hear from them again for maybe 10 years, and maybe never hear from them again. Ace Bowman, you know, he popped in the pro rodeo world there, and I believe he won the Rookie of the Year one year, and then you just never heard from him again. You know, didn't enter any more steer opens. But the Osage is full of guys like that. Mark Freeman, you know, some guys like that. They just pop in and out, and then they're out doing other things. So
right.
Well, you
not Rod.
No, he stayed with him, I believe. You grew up on the pipeline pretty much. Your family on your dad's side were all pipeliners, seemed like, Did you go off with him a lot as a young kid? Or?
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, I started working when I was 15.
Yeah.
And, back then we didn't have internet or anything.
Right, sure.
So when they had me sign up, then I signed up as I was 18.
Yeah.
So I'd go work all summer running dozers on the pipeline. And then come home in the winter. And back then, we really, we didn't have indoor arenas like we do now.
Right,
We had
right.
Slim Dotson's arena.
Sure.
But nobody really had indoor arenas.
Yeah.
So you didn't have that many ropings in the wintertime.
Right.
And so I'd go to some early ropings. But then whenever summertime hit, I went where the money was at.
Right.
And so I went on the jobs.
Yeah. I remember when your dad built that indoor arena out there at your house, and talk about how he was very supportive of you, wasn't he?
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, my mom and dad, they was 110% behind me.
Right.
I wouldn't be where I'm at today without them. I mean,
Yeah.
they if I wanted to rope, it was go,
Yeah.
But my dad was also, if you're going to rope, you go rope. Because I remember as I was young, I'd be like, how come we don't join the country club? They got a swimming pool up there. They got tennis courts. They've got, we could kind of do that. And he said, well, yeah, we'll join that and we'll sell the horses.
Yeah.
If you got time to go golf, you got time to swim, you got time to practice. And so we didn't join the country club. I wanted to rope more than I wanted to to swim and play tennis. So
What about Orban? He probably wanted you to be a calf roper, didn't he?
Orban was a really great calf roper, never tripped steers. But he was such a great horse trainer that we trained talent together.
Right.
And so I joined the Osage Steer Roping Club out here. It was called the Osage Steer Roping Association back then. Blackie Ricketts, Charles Chambers,
Yeah, Charlie Chambers.
Dwayne Ramey, and Steve Thomas.
Yeah.
They put all that together.
Yeah.
And so the first year you had to buy your own steer, so I wasn't in it that year. And then my senior year, I wanted to get in it, and they opened it up to where you could join it. But it was anybody that hasn't been to the national final. No, back then you couldn't even have a PRCA card.
Yeah. What year would that have been when that formed?
I would say roughly, I think it formed in 80. And I was in it in 82.
Yeah. I think I started in 83, maybe.
Three.
Something like that.
And then
we roped heifers with plastic horns. I remember that.
Right. And then Mark Spencer came and started furnishing these. Him and his dad bought some horn cattle.
Right,
They wasn't
right.
Mexicans, but they might have been Herefords or Blacks
yeah,
or Baldies or anything. you
I
know.
remember that.
And so that's really the only place that you could go rope where you didn't have to go rope against Charlie
Right.
Lynn, Shote Webster.
Right.
Shote was older at that time. I roped
Right.
with him a little bit, not much.
Right.
But you had Charlie Lynn, you had Walt Arnold, you had Arnold Felts, you had
Yeah.
those guys that you had
Right.
to go learn to rope against.
Right.
But my dad always said, if you want to get tough, you go where the tough's at.
Right.
And so, that's what we did.
Yeah. Yeah, that club was really good.
Yes, sir.
To get people started.
It got them started, had a good turnout, and then Delbert Kyler took it over, kind of started furnished steers, him and Bob Jones. And when they did, then they started buying Mexican steers, and it just got better and better.
Yeah. We had it out at Bob Jones. How many years did they have it out there at Bob Jones? A couple? Or
They had it a few years out there
Yeah.
at Bob's, and then Delbert built his place out there, and so we went out there.
Yeah. Well, they moved back to the fairgrounds too.
Yes, sir. Had them at the fairgrounds.
Yeah.
And that was really, you had so many members that wanted to rope there because it's the Ben Johnson Arena.
Right.
That
club was big back then too.
It was big, and then I came in when I was president, and then I moved it to the Lazy E. We had it at the Lazy E for a few years while I was taking care of it, and that really got big.
Yeah. Huh.
When did you first start training to be a steer roper, Rod?
Probably 82.
Who all helped you out with that?
Mainly Orban, and then I went around and really, because I'd go watch steer ropings, and I went and watched kind of guys that I liked their style of roping. I use a little bigger loop than a lot of people, and I rope over on the right hip than more people. Now, back then, more people kind of roped in behind them or on the right, but nowadays, probably 90% of the people get over on the team roping side, over on the left. And so, Arnold Felts, Walter Arnold, Charlie Lynn, that's kind of the guys I watched that I really liked their style until then I started rodeoing.
I see a little bit of Arnold Felts in your style every now and then, I think.
Yeah.
Now that you say that.
Arnold, Arnold had a big swing, big slow swing, but really a lot of follow through and a lot of slack. And Arnold was probably, in my opinion, one of the toughest ropers ever going down the road because
Mr. Smooth, that's what they called him.
Ice water in his veins. It didn't matter. He didn't matter what he had to be. He might go out there and tie one, and you look at him, you say, man, he was 13 and he was 11.
Arnold to this day, he could probably still sneak up and win some money if that's what he decided he wanted to do. One of the best ropers ever. Yep. But you have your own style, so that's kind of why I was wondering who you trained with when you were young, because it's your very unique style. That it looks like maybe you just adapted things you saw from other people, just like you saw, and made it your own, the Rod Hartness style, the Rockin Rod style.
Well, he was about the first one I remember roping on that right side and then cutting across, and it had a lot of speed up when you hit the steer. Was one advantage to that, I thought.
Yes, sir. And I think when you do that, you get more cattle hitting for a left-handed tie. And when I first started, people wanted right-handed ties. Mm-hmm. I didn't want a right-handed tie.
I didn't either. I tied better left-handed.
Yeah. Because, they used to run up, get to the left hip, make the steer move away from you, and then hit and let him hit and roll over for right-hand tie because the cattle lay better. But so what we did, we went from roping in the 70s to roping, 750, 800-pound steers to roping in the 80s, and we're roping, 550, 600-pound steers. So we dropped down on our weight to where we could handle it better.
Yeah, you didn't need to roll them over.
Didn't need to.
Well, you were still roping against a lot of the old timers that was doing it the old way. Still tying them pretty quick, and you had a totally different style than a lot of those guys. But you obviously started tying them way quicker, which makes Rockin Rod an appropriate name for you because he won a lot of go rounds, a lot of go rounds, and tied a lot of the fast steers. How many fast steers have you won at the Ben Johnson just tying the fastest steer of the day?
I don't know. I've
lost count.
Probably I wouldn't even know. I know I've won probably 3 or 4 when I was riding Jess. Riding Talent, and I won 3 or 4 riding Champ, and I won a few on a couple other horses. So I bet I've been in there close to 8 or 10, I would think, go rounds.
How many national finals go rounds have you won?
I do know that 15. Kurt Robinson sent me that. I won 15 national finals go rounds.
Average one a year?
I never won the average. Back then, really, you could win 2 go rounds and win more than the guy that won the average. So when I went to the finals kind of on a Sonny Davis type deal. I looked at every round. I wasn't worried about the average. If
you won every round, the average would take care of itself.
Yes, sir.
I've heard that somewhere before.
Yeah, and so it's because it's all, you're there to win money.
Yeah.
And that's where the money was at, in the go rounds back then. But I think I placed in the average 3 or 4 times. Third, I think, is the best I ever placed, in the average. But it wasn't my horse's fault. It was more the rider's fault than it was anything.
What was it like winning Cheyenne? That had to be something.
That was
early in your career, too, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was 21. I was my second year. And I know I called my Uncle Orban, and because back then when we roped at Cheyenne, when you ran the 3rd round, that's the third run on the steers. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, when you rope at Cheyenne, the short round is fresh cattle. So, they just walk to the line. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, back then, the cattle ran.
They took from the steers the guys that made the short round.
Right.
The 15 guys that when they used to take 15 guys to the short round, they brought both of their first 2 steers and put them in the draw. Mm-hmm. That way it was an even thing. That way, if they got by one of the bad ones and made the short round, they brought that steer to the short round with them. So that's the way it was then.
Yes, and so you run that third run, you got a third run on the steer with a 30-foot score. So yeah, he's going to be moving.
Yep.
And I remember calling home, talking to Orban, and he told me, he said, "You got the fastest horse out there. There ain't nobody going to get close to you." He said, "You just go rope your roping." And I did. I mean, Talent was the fastest horse going. I mean, there wasn't another horse in his class at that time. He was an own son of Top Deck and out of a 3 bars, own son of 3 bars. So, he could fly.
Well, how did you come up with him?
We raised him.
Oh, you raised him?
We raised him off a Deca Center mare out of that we bred to Orban stud, Deca Center. And then we bred him to 3 bars down there by Ada.
Yeah.
And that's how we came up with him. And he was always a small horse. He never did really grow until he got about 6 or 7 years old. And because I roped calves on him and I team roped on him, and then started this club. And I'm like, well, I've got him. I need to just let's just rope on him. And he just turned into a really nice horse. No telling how much better he would have been if I would have really known what I was doing.
Right.
I mean, I used to go out to Bob Smith's when they built the arena out there at the Adams Ranch, which is owned by the Mormons. Now they're selling their land.
Right.
And so they built a big arena out there, and I'd go out there, and Bob Smith would have me 30 or 40 head of steers. And I was riding some outside horses, and heck, I'd trip 30 or 40 a day, rope 100 a day, and just every day roping, tripping steers.
Yeah.
And then that club roping helped, and then then all of a sudden you just after that club roping in 82, 83, and I got with Delbert Kyler, and he said, "Hey, I'm gonna buy your card for you." And so Delbert bought my card in 85, and Sean Burchett came to me and said, "Hey, I want you to go with me next year." And when I got in with Sean and Roy Cooper, then that just took me to a different level, because these guys, there wasn't no being off the barrier 6 inches. There wasn't no setting it up, tracking him. I mean, it was whipping your horse across the line and getting your arm up and roping them.
Not very many people remember who Sean Burchett is. I believe 2-time world champion, steer roper, kind of reinvented right there with Rod, right in the same area, reinvented roping right there. And the steer roping, they started tying the top leg. No one had ever seen it before. I remember all the old timers grumbling, "Can you believe this guy's tying the top leg and he gets off his horse so fast?" But tell us a little bit about Sean Burchett, Rod, since you traveled with him, and not very many people got to know Sean as good as you got to know Sean, because he died so young.
Sean just never thought anybody could beat him. Nobody. When he pulled in the arena, that there was nobody even in his class, and most of the time he was right. And but a workaholic. When we would practice, we'd practice and we'd get a steer down, we would run and tie, and we'd put the stopwatch on us tying, because he didn't like to get beat. And he would try me and try me and try me. And he was just a hard competitor. If you was in the rig with him, it was you against everybody else. That rig right there. And that's what I liked about in those days. It's a little different nowadays, but back then, when you hauled together, that's your group. That's who you was with. You pushed for each other, you helped each other, you whatever.
Sure.
Nowadays, some of these guys, they might get in the rig with you just to get a ride. You don't see them. They ain't over there helping you push the steer. They ain't it's a different deal than what it used to be.
Yeah.
A lot different.
Sean was a lot different. There's those guys that don't come around very often that can win every go round every time they nod their head. That's a threat, and also is a threat to win every average at every rodeo they enter. That's a double, triple threat that doesn't happen very often. Normally you have your go round guys, and then you got your average guys. But Sean was one of the ones, like Trevor Brazil or Guy Allen, right, that was a true threat on any go round or any average. And I was young, so I don't really remember how he died, Rod. How did that go down?
He was on his way to look at a calf horse down by Whitesboro, and I don't know if he fell asleep. He left that night from home, and he was driving, and he fell asleep or something. He hit an embankment there on the overpass.
Oh no!
And killed him. And I think it was roughly 93. I think was when that was. But yeah, there's no telling how many more gold buckles he would have won. You know, a lot of people kind of had, rodeo, and a lot of people don't really. What they win is what they got to kind of win to keep going. It's now Sean didn't need that. His mom, they owned the phone company there in Pryor, and they had money, and his dad Randy was just the nicest guy you'd ever meet, and he's national finals winner, Cheyenne Frontier Days winner, and all that and everything, and Sean would get a little wild, but he could rope.
Well, he could have been off in his new Mustang or Camaro, just having a grand old time on the beach or anything, but he was putting in the hours and the sweat to become one of the best in the world. And I remember watching him rope as a kid, and I remember everything about him. He was the first guy to consistently tie the top leg on a steer, and the very first one, period. Yeah. And it was just a great thing to watch Sean Burchett rope.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Going back to your old horse Talent, how long did he last, Rod?
Well, he passed away when he was like 24, 25. But, I've only made the finals on him 5 years because I got into the pipeline business. And so I quit rodeoing there for a few years and maybe just go to a few. But a lot of people don't know this, but I was really good friends with Ed Gaylord. And so in the winter of 85, I was heading for Ed. We was going to team rope. We go to Phoenix and Tucson and all those winter ropings. And so he'd fly over and pick me up there at Bartersfield, and I'd go and head for him and ride Dick Yates's horse, and he'd ride JD's hill horse. And we was coming back from Goliad, Texas, after our steer roping, and Ed asked me, he said, "What do you want to do after you get done playing cowboy?" And I said, "Well, I want to start me a pipeline business." And he said, "Well, when you get ready, let me know." He said, "I'll back you." And so after I won Cheyenne that year and made the finals and everything, so I went and seen him the end of that year, and I said, "Hey, Ed, I'm thinking about starting that pipeline company." And I had everything wrote down, what it's going to run, what it's going to cost, and all this and that little. And he just pulled his desk drawer out, pulled me out a check, and wrote it and said, "Get going." So we kind of kicked that off in 87. And so I didn't hardly go any in 87 and got really busy. And then I went there in 88 and 89. And a lot of that was because my dad was pushing me to go because I had this good horse. He wanted me to go. And so I was kind of in a dilemma. I wanted to rodeo. You want to make the finals. But, man, I've got this guy with all this knowledge in pipeline industry. I mean, in pipeline, and there's a lot of potential there, on money. And so after that, I went those couple of years a little bit. And then I hung it up for 3 or 4 years because we was just so busy. We had so many jobs going. We had 3 or 4 jobs going, and the type of pipeline work that we did was all bid work, and it was mainline work. It wasn't rehab work. It was you bid it and you do it all from start to finish. And so, I mean, I wouldn't even be close to where I'm at today if it wasn't for Ed Gaylord. I'm telling you, he did the same thing for steer roping. I mean, when he built that Lazy Arena, him and Delbert Kyler put all these little rodeos at Ottawa, Kansas, and Fredonia, and all those little rodeos like that. Delbert would put up the money, and Ed would split it, and then they'd run a Lazy E flag, and man, that's just what really started booming the steer roping. Because those committees didn't really want to put up any extra money, but then you've got these 2 guys coming up saying, "I'll put up the money just to have it." And Bronk Rumford was running those rodeos then.
Well, it takes people like Delbert Kyler, one of the greatest supporters of our sport there's ever been, and Ed Gaylord, to get things done, and people not just talking about getting things done, people just actually doing things.
Yes, sir.
So
So
Nowadays, in the last few years, you've been going to the senior opens.
yes, sir. Started it in about, well, we had little buddy in 2015. And so I just backed off because I wanted to be home with him. I didn't, want to be gone. And I still rope a little bit, but I don't, and I say a little bit, I rope about every day. But as far as going, I don't really go. I go to the senior opens because you can kind of do them on one day and stuff and be home on a weekend.
Let me give you a list of who's roping in the seniors right now, Jimbo. We got Rod Hartness. We got Rocky Patterson. There's Guy Allen. There's Shorty Garden. There's, it's a list of the who's who's. It's still all the same guys that they can go to these rodeos and win money, or they just pick on the same themselves that they've been picking on since the 70s or 80s.
Right.
The same group of guys. So, it's almost like the seniors PGA. It's the masters. It's the greatest of the greatest guys. Roping every time. So, what year did you win the world in the seniors?
16.
2016.
16, yeah.
You became a world champion.
Yeah, won the senior in 16. Won the average upper in 15, and then I won the year in 16.
In my mind, when I think, okay, senior roping's going on, and a guy like Rod Hartness is in there, he's going to win every year the world championship, So that goes to show you just how tough the senior roping is right now, Jimbo.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same wolfy guys that win day in and day out.
Absolutely. What year did you win the Ben Johnson?
I was trying to think of that coming down here. I'm really not for sure. I think it was maybe around 98 because I know my girls was only about 5 or 6 years old. And I think around 98.
What was the biggest thrill, winning Cheyenne or winning Ben Johnson in your hometown?
The Ben Johnson, I was always real close in there a few times riding Talent because it had that long score, but it just seemed like it was tough to get over that hometown deal.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Right.
You remember, Cody might not remember, but they used to do the Ben Johnson for a few years, and you roped 2 the first day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they had 70-some guys that would rope.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, the first time I roped in it, I won it the first day.
Mm-hmm.
And then they took the 35 guys out of the Saturday to rope Sunday. Mm-hmm. And I ended up tying the fastest steer and winning 4th in the average on Sunday. I had a steer kick and try to get up.
Yeah.
And, Cheyenne is just so,
It's
that's the
Cheyenne.
daddy.
Yeah, daddy mom.
That's
Right.
the daddy, but it's, I would hate to pick, because they're both just,
Right.
Cheyenne, you got to really, really draw good at Cheyenne.
Sure.
Because the arena's not set up for steer roping,
Right.
and you just got to get one to get off that left fence a little bit.
Yeah.
And the Ben Johnson is set up for
It's
steer
probably
roping.
more of a drawn contest than any roping
yes,
out
sir.
there.
Yeah, yes, sir, by far.
Yeah.
By far, because I've seen guys up there. You can come from either side, the heading side or the tripping side, and those guys that come from the heading side, sometimes they'll push the steer just all the way to the right side, or it'll just come right down that left fence. And if one gets on that left fence, Cody knows this. It's hard to get by them. I mean, it's.
I always just went from the side that I always went from. I didn't want to mess anything up. If I didn't practice from the head side, and what made me think I was going to go to the biggest rodeo in the nation and go from the side that I wasn't used to going on. So that's the main reason I never did. But, you say that about Cheyenne, but there are a lot of guys that seem to win there consistently year in and year out. But it seems to be a lot of times they're older guys or some guys with a lot of patience, it seems like, and they've been there, done that, and they know what's going to happen. At Cheyenne,
Right.
If you get in a very big hurry there, it'll definitely bite you in the rear if things aren't set up correctly, for sure, at Cheyenne.
And I think it's changed a lot in the last few years because they don't rope cattle near as size they used to. Used to they roped some steers.
Right.
They was on. Well, I mean, Cody and Rocky furnished them for years, and I mean there wasn't no draws on there. I mean, there's some big stout. Especially if you had them that third round, you better be cowboyed up to go catch them that third round. And nowadays, they're pretty drawed. I remember one year up there, Guy Allen won all 3 rounds in the average. They didn't weigh nothing.
I think that's the only time Guy ever won that roping.
I bet it probably was.
But when he did it in a big grand fashion.
When he did it, he told everybody to go home and practice a little more because he put a school on.
I remember
talking
that,
about
Rod.
coming from that other side, I never forget because Sean was pretty outspoken. I mean, he didn't. I mean, he never held back on nothing, and so they'd always come up to you when you ride in there, and they say they didn't have a gate setting over on the heading side back in, so you had to come from the tripping side and walk over there with your horse if you was going to rope from that other side. And they'd always ask Sean, say, well, what side do you want to rope from? Is this steer roping or team roping? Well, of course, them guys volunteering, they didn't really probably know if it was steer roping or team roping, They're just looking over there. But every time.
Yeah.
And
I bet Dan Taylor got a kick out of it, though.
oh, yeah. Yeah, Dan,
He was a good guy.
yes, sir. He ran the gate there for years, as long as I can remember.
How many different horses did you ride at the finals?
It was
Well,
Merle Davis ran the gate. Dan was the shoot boss.
Yep.
yeah.
Them high top boots.
Oh, I thought,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rod. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, that's fine.
I wanted to give Merle his due. He ran the gate.
Sure.
Dan was the boss.
I made the finals with Talent, and then I made the finals with Jess, a horse that I bought off of he come down here off the Beaufort Ranch, and I bought him off Billy Joe Dealback.
Yeah.
As
I
a
remember
5-year-old.
Jess well.
Yeah.
That guy was a cowboy.
And then my later years, I leased a horse off of a lady called Cinderella, Karen Herbst down there in Texas. And she bought the horse for Roy Cooper off of Trevor Brazil. His name was Roan Ranger. And she ended up back home with him because Roy wasn't really rodeoing. And so some people called me, a guy that was driving for Mike Arnold, and said, hey, Rod, you need to call Karen on this horse. So, I sure didn't want to go around Roy. Mm-hmm. So I called Roy, and I said, Roy, Karen still got that horse. I said, if you're not going to use him, could I call? Because I don't want to go underneath somebody. Mm-hmm. I said, could I call and see if I could ride him? And of course, Roy, he's a really good friend. He said, yeah, man, you need that horse. He said, man, you will kick their butts on him. And so I got him that year, and I made the finals that year. Come back the next year, and blew a knee out here at the Ben Johnson. Blew my right knee out. I was sitting like third in the world at that time. I blew my knee out. Just won Coleman, Texas, and come to the Ben Johnson and blew my knee out. And so that put me out all year. And then I came back the next year with him and made the finals. But when I got the horse, he was like 19 years old. Mm-hmm. So I got 3 years out of him, and he was really, really nice horse.
He won a lot of money on that horse, Jimbo.
Yeah.
Yep.
Took a lot of my money on that horse.
I never didn't remember him because I'd quit then and just wasn't going. But I remember Talent Jess
Yes,
quite
sir.
well.
Yep. And Jess was always, I got Jess off of Charlie Noble whenever I was starting in those club ropings because we was just training Talent and really didn't, we was learning how to train. And I mean, Orban watched everybody and so it didn't take him. I mean, he could tell you what you need to do with any kind of horse. And he'd had a little drive wagon set up and he'd drive him so when I was going on the pipeline, he'd just work him and drive him and all that. And then so we bought Jess because he was kind of a finished horse. And, back then in 82, my mom gave $6,000 for him. And, I mean, you're thinking $6,000, man, that's a lot of money in 82.
Right.
You can't even find a prospect for
No.
for $6,000 nowadays.
You can't even buy a pony for $6,000 nowadays.
I mean,
A mean pony.
right. And,
Well, I think it's a lot of guys, you made the finals, I was just looking 15 times over a 25-year period and from 1986 to 2012. And, we see a lot of guys that have one horse, have a good lick with one horse and do pretty good for a few years. And then when that horse is done, they're kind of done. But
Exactly.
it's a testament to your ability to make the finals over that time span and several different horses, and stuff. And the dedication it takes to to stay after it that long.
Yes, sir. Well, I was taught from the best. I mean, I was taught, and that's where it comes from. I mean, if I wouldn't have had Orban there to to teach me on the scoring on the horses and just, I mean, we would lope horses all day long in front of the box, and then set them in there and let them rest and know that's their comfort zone before we ever ran one on them.
Yeah.
I mean, it was.
Yeah.
Orban was one of them. If you took that horse to a roping and he reared up in the box or he didn't score good, and I mean, it was like, don't you ever take my horse like that. And I mean, because he considered it his horse, because he did as much work on it as me.
Sure.
And but no, I was very blessed to have someone like that to help me and train me as good as he did.
No, I bet.
Traveling to rodeos has changed through the years, Rod, and you're still traveling. What was your first rodeo rig like? What were you driving?
I had a single cab or a 4-door pickup, single wheel. I had a 460 engine in it, and I bought a bumper pull steel trailer off of Steve Thomas out here. It was like an S&H. Ordered it, and I never seen drop down windows before, but I ordered one with drop down windows on the head side, and. Man, I thought I was the fanciest son of a buck going down the road. Now, I thought, hell yeah, they're going to see Rockin Rod pulling in now, If I pulled in that today, they'd be saying, man, Rockin Rod has hit hard times.
Exactly. Nobody hardly travels like that. You say, I was one of the last few still traveling like that, Jimbo.
Yeah.
I was one of the last few still traveling like that. Nowadays, we got, do you think that the rigs guys have actually helped the longevity of their careers?
I don't know if it's helped the longevity of their careers, but I sure think it has of the horses. Because back then, there's narrow trailers. I mean, if you had to get from one rodeo to another, I mean, it's hard for a horse to stretch out in a trailer and stuff. And I mean, now we got these trailers, they're 8 wide. I mean, I've got a trailer ordered right now. It's got this new flexi floor and the new uptown deal on it. That it's like riding on air suspension back here on them. I mean, I think it's helped the cowboys more than anything. Now, of course, Roy. Now he had the buses. Roy he rodeoed first class Cooper. I mean, it was when I'd get in and go with him, man. We had a 40-foot American Eagle bus, and then if we need to get from one place to another, we'd jump planes. I had Doug Whitehorn driving for me. Roy had a guy driving for him, and so my rig would go one place, Sean Burchett go the others, and I mounted Roy a lot in the 80s. And
well, he didn't have your typical steer roping style either, you guys.
No, but Roy would run right in there and take a good shot. It was never, and in my opinion, in my era. And I mean, there was Sean, there was Guy Allen, but I don't think there was a tougher steer roper than Roy Cooper. Because you look at his track record, he didn't practice till he got to the roping.
You could tell he didn't even practice tying steers at the house.
No,
I mean, he did it very well, but you could tell it.
It's just when he got to the roping, it was just catch them and get off. He said, if you're going to log them at home. He ain't going to log at a roping. And but you look at the record, he won the national finals in the steer roping 4 times because he would get tuned up for that.
I watched him one year. I don't know if it was in the 80s, one of the years he won the average there, and he averaged 13 seconds on these big, honking, black steers. Yes, sir. He sure did. And it's pretty hard on the steers that are roping today to average 13 seconds on 10 of them, but he did it. He did it back in the 80s, and it was really something to watch.
Yes, sir. Yeah, he. In fact, the year I won Cheyenne, he was riding Troy Fort's horse, and he came back high man in the short go. And he's the last guy to go, and I'm thinking,
boy, that's a bad old deal. Well, you're winning it, and he's got to go yet.
Well, but I'm a young kid.
Yeah.
Hell, I'm just like making the short go was great.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, everybody just keeps going out. And then I'm thinking, man, Roy Cooper's last one. I mean, I'm gonna win second at Cheyenne. That's a man. Hell, I'll take second all day long.
Sure.
And Roy missed his trip. Come back around, put a hamburger holt on the steer. You know what happened then? He got flagged out, and I got a picture. But when I made my run, I got a picture, and Roy's in the background over, and I mean just a clapping on my short round steer.
Yeah.
And so I see him at Dodge City, and I got my buckle on and everything, you know, and he rides up to me, and he says, you know, if my last year would have took it, your life would have been a whole lot different. But that's how Roy was.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I mean, but he was probably one of the best motivators that I've ever been with. He taught me how to get that loop out in front of me and be looking for that shot when I come across the line. And I mean, when it was a one-on-one with him, it was strictly, here's what you need to do.
When you're hanging out with the best, some of that rubs off on you,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
And then I started going with Pake McIntyre for a few years, and Pake was great. I mean, Pake was great because, I mean, how many guys back then in his 40s can change from roping left-handed to right-handed?
We were talking about that the other day, Cody and I.
And the year we went really hard, me and him together, he ended up, I think, 17th or 18th in the world. I'd have to look it up for sure.
He was real close to making the
Real
national
close.
finals both hands.
Yes.
Both hands.
He won the Ben Johnson right-handed.
Won the Ben Johnson right-handed.
Sure did.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine?
I can't. It'd be like one of us trying to decide to rope left-handed.
I mean, there's just
There's no way.
No way. I mean, there's going to be a lot of accidents if I do it.
Right. Well, probably not me because I wouldn't catch none.
No, well, yeah, me too. I'd probably throw it and trip my horse with it. I mean, but Pake was really, really fun to go with. And I've been very blessed. I had a lot of good traveling partners, a lot of good guys that looked out and wanted to win.
The rodeo world's a pretty good world,
Yes, sir.
all in all.
A lot of good people.
A lot
Yes,
of good folks. What about your sponsors, Rod?
Yeah,
Have you always had sponsors? You're a guy that one of the top guys that steer ropers that's had sponsors longer than most of the steer ropers. Now a lot of them have them, but back in the 90s, not that many people had any kind of sponsorships or anything.
Yeah, you go to the steer opens and you don't see very many guys with sponsors, and I never thought of that. And so I'm traveling with Roy and them guys. I'm like, we need to be rewarded for what we do. I mean, we need to be out there. One thing that hurts the steer ropers, we're not in front of the public eye all the time, and I blame a lot of that on our directors for not keeping us in there. We need to be. We're proud of our sport. We need to be out in front of it. And so I had casinos when I was rodeoing. I had casino sponsors. I was one of the only guys. I had the Washington Redskins as a sponsor because of my native heritage on the Seneca Cayuga side. And so I had them for 3 years, and I had a lot of oil companies. Wrangler is still with me. Iconolast, Splint Boots, and then a Choice of Champions, which is my ultimate, my stuff for my horses, supplement for my horses. And the only reason that I backed off on some of those, I'm not rodeoing anymore.
Sure.
And I just didn't think it was really right to get big sponsors in to sponsor me, and I'm not going, But I still go to a few, But I have good sponsors from Resistol on my hats. I have good sponsors on Rattler ropes on my ropes, and that's got to be a big expense for everybody, buying ropes nowadays. But heck, I had.
Are there any ones that feel good nowadays?
Well, I started using these new ones called Rattler, and because all the polys, I had a problem them breaking.
I heard about that here a year or two ago.
Just breaking, and but shoot, I had Crown Bristow down in Dodge dealership. They furnished me a truck for 3 years. I had a guy in Texas furnished me a living quarters trailers. So, sponsorships is great, but you got to show that you're doing something for them sponsors. The biggest thing about cowboys, they think they go to a sponsor and it's like, hey, I can help you on a tax deduction. You know, most people already have a tax deduction. They ain't got that. You got to show that you're going to be out in front of the public, in front of the people, and visit with them, have good personality. And but yeah, I was really blessed to have a lot of good sponsors.
You got a beautiful young family now, Rod.
Yes, sir.
Rope. You teaching him any of the ropes?
Well, yeah, he rides. You know, like right now he's just 5, and you know, I really didn't really start really roping anything till I was about 10 or 11, because all summer I'm on the pipeline. You know, so I feel like, you know, when they're kind of ready, they'll kind of start wanting to do it more. You know, he takes spells. Some days he's ready to ride for a week, and the next week, you know, he's ready to kind of lead them for a week or hang around. But it's you know, once they get a little older, like in your girls, to where then they want to go and, you know, those play days and stuff like that, to where then they can start kind of really riding by themselves and all that. It's fun. It's fun. At my age, I never thought I'd be raising a 5-year-old, but I wouldn't take nothing for it. I promise you that. It's you know, I've been lucky. I've rodeoed all over the United States. I've wanted to be a pipeliner. I've done pipelines all over the United States and won my share of what I wanted to in the rodeo business. And I don't know what else I could have changed. You know, people ask me, you know, what about winning the world championship? Well, you know, I never really thought of winning the world championship.
There's a lot of Hall of Fame football players that never won the Super Bowl.
Never even played in the Super Bowl.
Same with baseball players. Rod's had him a great career.
You know,
absolutely.
It was just, you either leave everything and you've got to really focus and rodeo and stay your mind strictly on that. But the only year I had that I didn't was in '86. But then when I started my company, I might be out of roping and I've got 2 or 3 jobs going. And I've got hands over here and over there and payroll going. And so it just, you never focused your whole 100% on rodeo. To be a world champion, don't get me wrong. I would love a gold buckle, but I wouldn't change what I have now for a gold buckle at all. I put 2 girls through college without they never had to have a student loan. I think that was a great accomplishment, you know, to go across to Oklahoma State. Now, I'm not an Oklahoma State fan, but I did send them plenty of money down there. And, but, you know, that was kind of 2 of my happiest days of my life. They got graduated, and the last check I had to send down there. But, you know, I'm kind of a Boomer Sooner fan.
Yeah, me too.
I've always liked how you take your family with you to the rodeos. It's a family thing for you, and you're still doing that to this day. I'm sure Ropey's got him a horse you'd load in there and take with y'all, and you're teaching him the right way of life right there, Rod.
Yeah, we got rid of all of our trailers except my 2-horse because we got these other ones ordered, and because of all this pandemic, everything's behind.
Oh yeah, he ain't liking that.
And well, yeah, because the second trip we went, one of my horses stayed home, and we loaded up old Hulk. So, but you know, that was fine. That was fine. He wanted to take his horse, and so we did. But yeah, it's been great. Ashley, my wife, is I mean, she's behind me 110%. The last couple of times I made the finals, I mean, she was teaching at that time in school, and she drove for me all summer. We took the girls and rope. Rope wasn't born then, but we took the girls and had a rig, and she drove all night long to get me to the next one, to the next day. So
that's the best memories there are.
Oh yes,
you know, having your family on the road with you and just living the life. Living the rodeo life. It's the greatest. Mm-hmm. Jimbo, you got anything for Rod?
Oh, Cody, I'd just like to say that we're proud of Rod here at Pawhuska, and it's just it's amazing what the talent this whole county and this area has kicked out, you know, over the years, and he's just another one of them. And 15 national finals, that's a pretty elite list, a pretty short list of people up there with that many steer roping finals.
Not too many people has won Cheyenne. Made the steer open finals 15 times. Right. World champion, senior against the same people that he's been roping against his whole life.
Right.
He's really had a good career.
Absolutely. Great career.
Rod, I put everybody on the spot at the end of these. you've been everywhere. You've been rodeoing your whole life. You've been Canada to Mexico to East Coast to the West Coast. You know, what kind of advice, whether it's rodeo advice, life advice, that you got for the young folks coming up these days?
Well, biggest thing I say is, you know, if you want to rope steers, you got to tie steers down. You got to practice. You've got to practice. I mean, because Schultz Webster told me one time, you know, I don't know if you know, Schultz, my cousin, and his wife's a Garrett, which was Orban's and my mom's cousin, first cousin.
Wow.
But, you know, Schultz told me, he said, the more I practiced, the luckier I got.
Yep.
And he said, you know, when I'm out there in the practice pen, somebody else was sitting there in the house. Or it's kind of like what my dad said, being up at that pool or up there playing golf or all that. So, you know, there's not very many Trevor Brazils that can do it all, or Roy Coopers. Most of us got to really, really work our tail ends off to try to get there. And it's still tough once you try. I would say nowadays I'm not saying it's easier, but you got a lot more rodeos to go to. Back when your dad and me went and stuff, we had about 25, 30 rodeos. And we think about it when your grandpa and stuff went, you know, they had about 10 rodeos.
Yeah, I know.
So when you go, like those top 15, you got Schultz and Everett and, you know, your grandpa, they're all there at and Joe. And
right.
I mean, they're all, there's no duck offs.
No.
And there's not still a lot, but still there's Montanas, there's some places like that you can go to the Northwest to go to.
The bad part in the steer open event, you're going to run into some of the guys from down here when you go up there.
Yes,
and then there's a handful of the guys up there. They're just as wicked as anybody in the world, too. So.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Yeah, but practice, getting behind that box and tie them down. The more you tie down, the more you're going to be ready for that problem if you run into it out there when you're tying one down.
The more you do anything, the better you're going to get at it.
That's right.
For sure.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Rod,
sir.
thank you, man.
Hey, thank you.
Proud to know you.
Well, I'm proud to be here. I'm proud to know you all. And heck, I remember going out to Jimbo's house and roping with him, and his grandpa just sat right out there and watched us rope them. And I only went out there 2 or 3 times, but I had it's when you can rope with somebody like that, anybody you can rope with, because like you said, everybody's got their own different style. And so when I have these kids and stuff that come and rope with me today, you know, I tell them, really, I don't care if you swing your rope backwards if you catch. It's a catch and tie event.
It's all that matters at the end.
More you catch them, more you're going to tie down. So
What did Sean Burchett used to say?
Rope them when they're up, tie them when they're down. Fastest one wins the round.
Whew. All right. Rockin Rod, everybody. You can see more about Rockin Rod right here at the Ben Johnson Cowboy Museum. He has his own display in here. He has a saddle on display in here. His whole bio and his career is in here. Come in here and check it out. And if you want to meet him, we'll point you towards his house over there. He just lives just right outside of town here. Rod, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you all.
See
Appreciate
everybody next week on Cowboys of the Osage.